As of this morning, President Trump has flooded the nation's airports with ICE patriots who will be stationed there indefinitely, assisting with TSA operations because the Democrats are once again holding the American public hostage and trying to terrorize them because we refuse to go along with their agenda. And so now it has to be the case that Americans trying to travel will be significantly impeded in their efforts to do so, such that they experience the vibes of the nation as something undesirable, hopefully hold the incumbent administration accountable for that, and then we all lose and we all die. So that's very bad, but it's also very good. I can square these things for you, I promise. But first, we will also be discussing Robert Mueller, sort of a chief antagonist of Trump 1.0. He died, I guess, like just the other day, which is interesting. But more interesting than that was Donald Trump, of course, had to post about it on the internet, which led to all of the usual suspects saying that his freaking rhetoric was freaking mean. So we will discuss that. We will discuss the just nature of celebrating when bad people die. And then we will also get into a little bit of science because, of course, we love that, I guess. I saw a study. Don't we love studies? I saw one of those actually, believe it or not, on Twitter the other day, discussing sort of, I guess you'd say, mammalian behavior in captivity, how certain mammals, how certain animals view their prospects of escape, demoralization versus optimism, and how those affect the incumbent animal behavior. And obviously, human beings are not animals. I'm not making like a literal, like, Reddit tier science materialist argument. I'm simply saying I think that we can actually use that kind of observation to inform our contemporary political experience, given that, the people who are in charge of PSYOPs did not exactly just retreat and, like, go away. Those people are still employed in politics and making quite a bit of money, and those would be the people who are paying attention to freaking studies like this and viewing dogs in labs as equivalent to human beings. And so I do think that we can actually learn a lot about why perhaps we see so much demoralization when, though things aren't perfect, things seem to be going pretty well. So you would wonder actually where all this demoralization is coming from. So we will get into all of that and perhaps actually even more. It's Monday. Who knows what could happen? You will in a minute if you stay tuned. Okay, do that. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the John Doyle Show. We must discuss, a lot of you guys who are new to the whole, being terminally online, very much involved in the state of right-wing politics, you won't exactly remember this Robert Mueller character. I actually had, maybe I should go dig it up, the It's Mueller Time t-shirt from when this was all going on in Trump 1.0. This is, of course, an adored hero of the radical left, which is to say the entire left, especially the sort of MSNBC, CNN viewer class, one of the key players in the Russia hoax, the Russia collusion hoax, all of that throughout Trump's first term. So he actually passed away on Friday in his home in Virginia from Parkinson's disease. The guy was like, the season 1/2 antagonist of Trump 1.0. Like, he was such a villain in the eyes of the Patriot that it wasn't even like the season 1 antagonist. It was almost like, season 1 ends on a cliffhanger, gets into season 2, and then maybe midway through season 2, this guy, is more or less dealt with, we'll say, quite safely, quite legally, quite diplomatically. But it is to say, it is difficult to understand how big of a deal, this person was if you only started paying attention to, Trump and politics in 2020 and 2024. But for anyone who was around in 2016 and kind of, went through all of this with Patriots, with Donald Trump, with the administration, you remember exactly what this person was, what he represented, and both sides of the aisle as a sort of hero who's going to single-handedly expose Madrumpf on the one side, and then on the other side is just literally, a corrupt Washington bureaucrat, villain, antagonist, evil suit. So Trump later posted about this on Truth Social, of course, and he said, "Robert Mueller has just died. Good. I'm glad he's dead. He can no longer hurt innocent people. President Donald J. Trump." Now, it's tough to even get mad at this because he immediately clarifies the statement. He's not saying, "I'm glad he's dead, President Donald J. Trump," leaving it for the reader to decide his own experience. He immediately clarifies it. He says, "I'm glad he's dead," implying with the next sentence, because he can no longer hurt innocent people. I mean, ideally, ostensibly, we would all sort of more or less agree with this sentiment. But of course, the post has spurred outrage from all of the usual suspects, particularly the entire class of people who openly cheered and celebrated after Charlie Kirk was murdered in cold blood. Additionally, all of the usual suspects on the right, the sort of spineless conservatives, were, per usual, very quick to epically call out President Trump for his post. And so many leftists are now using the post to say, well, now Now we have a license. Now it's open season for the day that President Trump eventually passes away. Now we're going to throw parades in celebration, like literally as if they weren't going to already do that, as if they haven't been fantasizing about that day already for the past 10 years, like literally begging for it on a daily basis. Like they don't make entire social media accounts dedicated to whether this has happened yet, like literally like at did it happen yet, posting about this constantly. Like they're obviously going to celebrate whenever any conservative dies, like they did with Charlie Kirk, like they fantasize about when Trump dies, like whatever. But it's different because of the legacy of someone like Charlie Kirk, the legacy that will be belonging to someone like Donald Trump. That's obviously like measurably different. Like, we can have our left versus right perspective on those two people. But objectively speaking, like Donald Trump has been a sort of larger than life political figure. Charlie Kirk has been sort of a larger than life political figure. Robert Mueller was just like this crooked cop. He's like literally just like a pawn used by the left specifically to derail Trump's entire first term with just completely baseless conspiracy theories. So this was not like a larger-than-life figure who paved his own way. This guy is only remembered for being cast into that role by the left and then ultimately failing, by the way. Like, recall that. Recall the literal years spent by the mainstream media, by leftists, claiming that Mueller was going to take Trump down. Every weekend there was like some new smoking gun that turned out to be literally nothing every single time. And inevitably, he had to come out at the end of his investigation confirming what everybody already knew, which was that there was no collusion. And there's a great video, actually, from arch-patriot Charlie Kirk discussing how Robert Mueller sabotaged Trump's first term. And this was actually from 2020. Take a look.
In the first Trump term, they took a lot of it away from him. At this moment during Trump 1, we had Bob Mueller lurking around because of all of this fake Russian information. The most precious thing a president has is time. And they took time away from President Donald Trump. Every day he was up against the wall with these fake and unsubstantiated and deceitful rumors that were being thrown at him. And he was barely able to pass a legislative agenda, let alone be able to have an attorney general of his choosing because of this fabricated story by our own intel agencies. And so I think we need more than apologies here, Sean. I hope that we exhaust every possible judicial and potential indictment that could be done here, because this is a serious thwarting of our constitutional system. They say that we are a threat to democracy. What they did to Donald Trump, what they did to our country, what they did after the 2016 election is the greatest threat to democracy that we have seen in the last 50 years.
Yeah, that's going to go ahead and be a certified truth nuke. And it's so true. Again, you can't understand unless you were really there how damaging this actually was for the first Trump administration's ability to actually maneuver. Say what you will about Trump 2.0. If you're just comparing, even as a panic-in, Trump 2.0 to Trump 1.0, objectively speaking, more is being done in Trump 2.0 than 1.0. I am perhaps the biggest Trump shill working today. I can admit that. I celebrate that, but nonetheless, I admit that. A lot of the reason why Trump 1.0 was not able to get things done so effectively is because it was lacking that sort of mandate that it has now. It does kind of matter when you sweep all 7 swing states. It does kind of matter when you win the popular vote. It gives you, it gives your staff, it gives your political movement a sort of license to govern as though it does have popular consent. Whereas in 2016, it was largely treated as a fluke. I mean, it was treated like this was an illegitimate thing. Insofar as people were expressing support for Trump, it was just as like a middle finger to the establishment. So that's already kind of an insecure foundation upon which to govern. But now you have, literally from the day he gets into office, the entire mainstream media apparatus is spreading this narrative about Russia collusion, implying that this is not actually the legitimately installed president. This is not actually a reflection of the political will of the American people. This is somebody who was like illegitimately installed into office by the old enemy, the Russians, who, of course, the Democrats don't like, conservative base maybe doesn't like because of Cold War nostalgia, whatever you want to call it. This was very harmful to the maneuverability that the Trump administration had in order to actually enact its agenda. Now, obviously, there were other issues. There were personnel issues. There were, maybe you'd say, political savoir-faire issues. That is all true. But it is also true that what now gets sort of like relegated to the dustbin of movement history, the whole Russia collusion hoax, we laugh at it. We laugh at it because it's ridiculous and because we beat it and it's done. But that is something that still was extremely harmful to the Trump administration in its first iteration, which is why, when I see this news, I'm not going to cry about it. And I'm certainly not going to get mad at Donald Trump for like recognizing that, oh, hey, it's good when like a bad guy can no longer do bad guy stuff. And the conservative influencer class of today, people who got like red pilled in 2022, you would have been chewed up and spit out by the never Trump psyops of the first Trump term, the lead up to the first Trump. I don't know. I think you legitimately would have like opened up your wrists. The day that the Access Hollywood tape came out, we're already down. It's a month out until the election. Access Hollywood drops. I have to go to school and explain why the guy whose merch I've been wearing for the last like 6 months, over a year actually, is on tape describing the way that women will tend to behave around powerful men, you know, whatever. We're not relitigating that. We are well past that. The point is, that stuff was like a lot more difficult to defend than the kind of like, you know, I guess you'd say interim never Trump psyops, neo never Trump. It's always never Trump, but by a different name for different reasons. We discussed that. So I'm just trying to illustrate, you don't understand like what it was like to be told every week that it's Mueller time. See the way that these people were making like, you know, iconography of Robert Mueller, balloons, parties, cakes, celebrating merchandise. Again, I bought one of the It's Mueller Time t-shirts to mock these people after, of course, Trump was, you know, confirmed to have not actually colluded with the freaking Russians about this. But this was a hero for these people. This was a hero for the left. You know, a rare instance where one of their heroes is not some like, you know, career drug addicted criminal like rapist. But this is still a guy who more or less is occupying that same vein as somebody who exists solely to torment American society and anybody who is actually trying to right the course that American society has been on for the past 60 years or so. So, yeah, I am actually glad that he's dead. I'm glad that a bad man is no longer able to do bad things. I'm glad that bad people had to watch someone that was supposed to be a hero for them. I'm glad they had to watch that guy die as a failure. And I'm glad that Donald Trump got to watch this guy who literally tried, just like everybody else tried, to ruin his life. I'm glad he got the last laugh, because I have been so pissed off for the last 6 months thinking about how Charlie Kirk got murdered as a deliberate product of the environment that all of these people contribute to the construction of, but then they all get to carry on as usual, like nothing happened. So yeah, I'm glad to see another piece taken off the board. And yeah, I can say these things because I don't actually think that like being alive or whatever is like the end all be all. So I'm not going to treat it like some taboo. Like, yeah, me when someone does something that literally every person ever will do, like, hey man, you can't like joke about that. That's like really like serious. Like, dude, like give me a break. I believe the words that I'm saying when I talk about how these people are literally trying to destroy everything and get us all killed. And because I believe that, actually, I don't then like have it in me to tell the president, who personally was almost imprisoned and killed by these people, I don't have it in me to tell that guy like, hey, you know, you should probably like tone it down. You should probably not look at this guy dying and say, hey, look at that. Like, you probably shouldn't do that. You know, when one of your like biggest and most corrupt opponents from the past decade dies. Like, I just don't have it in me. I think that people need to, I don't know, maybe just like grow up a little bit. Like, it's always about the reaction to the bad behavior, right? It's never about the bad behavior itself. It's always about the reaction to the bad behavior, which is the chief expression of the school marm and her sort of like homosexual rugrats, right? That is the over-socialized reaction to all of this. When something bad happens, whether it's a criminal behaving in ways he ought not to be behaving in, whether it's something like this, notice how it's always the usual suspects. They never have the same energy. They never have the same focus in condemning the bad behavior. It's never the same energy when talking about the guy on the subway who was like threatening to stab people. It's never the same energy talking about the guy who is trying to illegitimately imprison a sitting president and ruin his entire administration, his political legacy. They're always absent for that. They might on paper like check the box like, I disagree with this action. Never do they have the, hey, now wait a minute. It's always the reaction to the bad behavior more than the bad behavior itself. And the reason they have a reaction to the reaction to the bad behavior, a little bit of a tongue twister, but that is nonetheless what it is simply because they are over-socialized. They are trying to notice that you are reacting in a way that is not socially approved to behavior which actually is more or less socially improved. It's legal, it's permissible, nobody's allowed to talk about it. The taboo is actually not the bad behavior. The taboo is not being like a schizophrenic criminal drug addict threatening to stab people on the subway. That's actually not so taboo. What is taboo is talking about that in a way that's honest. Just like it's taboo to celebrate when a bad guy dies, because obviously being a bad guy and trying to like ruin the lives of patriots, that's not taboo. Again, that is incentivized, that is promoted. The heroes are the people who do that. You are a bad person if you react to that in a way that is deemed to be antisocial, that is against how social incentives are aligning right now. And I just have no tolerance for that, whether it's this, whether it's, you know, all the like sort of like pro-life girl boss feminist women were getting mad at Trump for some of his rhetoric. You know, Megyn Kelly, who now is apparently too right-wing for Trump, You remember when Megyn Kelly like made a name for herself as she was coming up in Fox News? She was this little conservative starlet, and her big thing was to join all of the other conservative women at the time trying to take down Donald Trump. And she gave us, which is why, Megyn, I can't be mad at you because you did give this to us, which I will eternally appreciate. When she, had her big moment that was supposed to take down Donald Trump at that debate. You've called women you don't like fat pigs, slobs, and Trump immediately is like, you stupid. Only Rosie O'Donnell. It was the best thing that's ever happened in the history of spoken word. So thank you, Megyn, for that. But even though the result was good, that's not what you intended, was it? No, you wanted to have your epic go-off moment, owning the president for saying mean things about women. You had blood coming out of your eyes, blood coming out of your wherever. And so you had to have that moment. So, yeah, I don't have it in me to tone police, especially when it's not just like in a vacuum making these kinds of like crass comments. Again, this is an evil man who was doing evil things that was intended to result in like all of us having horrible lives and maybe even dying. So, yeah, I'm going to just kind of take like I missed the part where that's my problem approach to this kind of sentiment, I also think too, like, First John talks about this. You're not supposed to try to be more like merciful than the Lord. I think a lot of times people try to like extend this sort of like mercy and they call it Christian, but really it's just cowardice absent the biblical component, or at least their interpretation of the biblical component. They would still be tone policing. They would still be saying, hey, you can't say that. You can't say that about the left's heroes. And they'll call it Christianity. What it is just cowardice. You can read inscriptions from medieval execution swords. And it says in English, at the time it was written not in English. It's like these Germanic execution swords. But you can read the inscriptions and they say something like, when I raise this sword, I pray the sinner finds eternal life. Which is to say, this is a bad person who is going to die now. But we still pray for his soul. We still pray that God has mercy upon him and grants him eternal life. That actually squares very well in the mind of someone who actually believes in the impermanence of life on earth and believes that there is in fact an afterlife where all of us will be judged. If I don't believe that, if I believe that, hey, this is it, I'm probably going to place a pretty big emphasis on being alive or whatever and like breathing or whatever, because I don't know. I'm not confident that there's something after this that is infinite as opposed to this finite period that we spend on earth. So people can say that they believe in the afterlife or whatever, like they check the box. That would make me more comfortable, but the behavior, what they express, that doesn't seem to square with that. So I do believe that. And so, yeah, I am actually glad that this guy's dead. Not because I want him to go to hell, not because I think that it's my position to say that he was like an evil person who is beyond saving. I don't know what his faith was. I don't know anything about this guy other than like his demonstrated choices of public behavior and what I understand to be the consequences, quite obviously, of that behavior. So insofar as he's no longer able to do that, insofar as people who loved him because he did that now had to see their hero die as a failure, I am happy about that. That's not because I think it's my choice to say, like, when people, get to live or die or whatever. That's not the point. The point is, it is actually, like, okay to enjoy when bad people are no longer around to do bad people things. And it's also okay to not jump to immediately tell President Trump, who apparently nobody wants to empathize with President Trump, everything he's been through the last 10 years, all of a sudden, all of that empathy is gone. But with Robert Mueller, like, come on, you can't be mean to him. Grow up. Grow up. Believe the words you're saying. There is a justice in taking a little bit of a patriot victory lap on Truth Social when somebody who tried to, ruin your life and get everybody killed. There is a little bit of justice in that when that guy doesn't meet the best ending and ultimately died as a failure. So, sorry, don't know what to tell you. But if you are a leftist who is coping with the loss of yet another one of your corrupt criminal heroes, I do have to tell you, I will extend this olive branch. I have alcohol for you to consume, provided that you trade to us U.S. dollars. A lot of these bourbons are chasing trends. This is not the case with our friends over at Flying Ace. These people are chasing legacy. They are chasing your dollars by producing for you straight bourbon made the way that it was meant to be made. It's balanced. It's bold. It is pro-patriot or pro-you in general. If maybe you're not quite aligned with the patriot cause yet, doesn't matter. There's no gimmicks, no fluff. It is just a fantastic product made for you specifically, somebody who still believes in high standards and hard work and doing things the way they ought to be done. Alignment with nature, alignment with morality. It's Aristotelian. Whether you are winding down after a long day or you're raising a glass with your cool friends, it will deliver for you literally every time. Again, not about hype. It is about heritage, getting back to what we were all supposed to be doing for literally ever, which is consuming alcohol because John Doyle told you to on the internet. So if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, go to flyingacespirits.com, use code BLAZE for free shipping. We will be right back to discuss ICE occupying the airports. ICE occupied airport. Yeah, literally so true. Okay, BRB. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the program. So for about a month now, the U.S. government has been experiencing a partial shutdown due to the efforts of congressional Democrats basically to refuse funding for DHS. And this has led to many federal employees, including TSA, to be working without pay. And so this has caused extreme lines at airports all across the country. Many travelers showing up 4-5 hours before their flights and still ending up missing them due to crowded TSA checkpoints. There are lines going out the door, wrapping around the airport, certain areas around the country. And then, if you know anything about airports in like Atlanta, New York, Houston, it's particularly bad, given that those airports are already particularly bad themselves. And so Democrats have refused to pass any funding bill that doesn't completely gut ICE's funding. Hakeem Jeffries stated the Democrats will refuse to fund DHS until they're guaranteed that no ICE agents will show up to polling places during the midterms, which is a very interesting thing to say. Take a look.
It's the reason why we are in a DHS shutdown right now, because Republicans have refused to agree to the type of bold, transformative, meaningful, and dramatic reforms we are demanding in order for the Department of Homeland Security funding bill to move forward. And I won't go through all of the demands, much of which we've talked about repeatedly in the public, but one of those demands is keep ICE out of sensitive locations. And we've defined that as schools, houses of worship, hospitals, and polling sites. We want an explicit prohibition that ICE can go nowhere near any polling sites in the United States of America. It's one of our...
I could maybe get the other stuff, schools, hospitals, places of worship. Polling sites? Isn't that like the one place, if you're a Democrat who, again, is not lying, which I guess will indulge in a little thought experiment, polling places would be actually the only place that ICE would be like allowed to go to, since that's the one place where, according to you, illegal aliens never are. They have no business there. They're certainly not voting. So what would be the issue then with ICE going there, just generally speaking? Why then would you have to actually place emphasis specifically on polling locations to say they can't go there? To equate a polling location with a place like a hospital where they're sucking on the teat of the American taxpayer, going and just occupying emergency rooms because like their arm feels weird. And they don't know why. They're like, hey, let's go cost like $4,000 to the American taxpayer because my arm feels weird. It's like, I'm really fat and I'm wearing like my Hello Kitty t-shirt and my arm feels weird because the shirt is like not fitting properly. So I'm going to go sit in an emergency room and spend $4,000 of American taxpayer money. Okay, hospitals I get. Places of worship, okay, whatever. And then schools, again, maybe they shouldn't be there, but I at least understand all of those things. Polling places, I don't know about that one, but I guess it just does reaffirm what we already know about the function of these people in our country, which is, of course, to uproot the political sovereignty of the patriot and hand it right over to Democrats. It's a very nice little deal they have arranged there. But in any case, to combat this, Trump announced on Truth Social that ICE agents are going to be stationed across the country at various airports to assist TSA agents and speed up travel times. He posted on Truth Social and said, quote, "On Monday, ICE will be going to airports to help our wonderful TSA agents who have stayed on the job despite the fact that the radical left Democrats who are only focused on protecting hardline criminals who have entered our country illegally are endangering the USA by holding back the money that was long ago agreed to with signed and sealed contracts and all. But watch, no matter how great a job ICE does, the lunatics leading the incompetent Dems will be highly critical of their work. They will do a fantastic job. The great Tom Homan is in charge." President Donald J. Trump. So it's since been stated that ICE will remain in airports indefinitely. There's a new video we have from Trump saying that he will actually even consider sending the National Guard to assist airports if Democrats continue to hold Americans hostage. Take a look at that.
I want to thank ICE because they stepped in so strongly. They'll do great. And if that's not enough, I'll bring in the National Guard. We're not going to have the Democrats destroy our country. These people are the most destructive, sick people, the Democrats. And they're fighting for this. They're fighting for men and women's sports. They're fighting for transgender for everybody. Everybody go out, get your kid a nice operation, and change the sex of your kid.
They are fighting for transgender for everybody. So true, Mr. President. Actually, like a profound statement, like when he says that we've been fighting communism for thousands of years. Like if you give yourself permission to just analyze the speech, it is actually extremely profound. Take your kid out, get him a snow cone, and get him a transgender for everyone. Get him a sex change operation. It's literally true. But he later posted that he would consider a deal with Democrats that would trade $5 billion in ICE funding in exchange for the SAVE Act, voter ID, banning gender transitions, all of that stuff, which, again, fat chance that they take that. But even then, $5 billion fewer dollars for ICE, I'm not in love with that. However, you have to remember that we secured, like, literally the greatest funding increase for immigration enforcement in history, like anywhere ever, period. So shaving $5 billion off that, again, for securing another huge victory, the SAVE Act, that is not exactly a bad deal. We still actually win, I think, with both of those things, which is, of course, why it's probably not going to happen. But alternatively, Trump suggested that maybe just Senate Leader John Thune just do what must be done and eliminate the filibuster so Democrats can stop terrorizing the American people at the behest of the radical left, illegal aliens. And so, yeah, this morning we've already seen videos popping up all over social media of ICE agents and airports all across the country. And if ICE is successful, this could massively boost the reputation and favorability among the American people, which is important. And then it would also further paint Democrats in a terrible light because Americans like competence. They like actually displays of like competent government, things functioning for them. And if Democrats are enabling TSA to sort of disintegrate, President Trump sends an ICE, the National Guard, whatever it may be, things are now, once again, running on time. That is going to actually give a more positive vibe experience to the American public, which is actually important. So ICE agents should have been in airports maybe the whole time. Now that they're there, maybe they should stay there. At least a large number of them should stay there. Airports have long been this like dystopian third world hellhole that makes you like unaware that you're even in your own country. And I think it's good that we actually fix this because people experience politics. People experience everything. They experience their country in terms of vibes. And when you go to an airport, especially an airport in a city like Atlanta or Dallas or New York, pretty much any airport. I've been to maybe every airport in the country, literally every single one. And every time I go there, I am not having like a very fun sort of Home Alone 2 kind of airport experience where I'm enjoying what I am surrounded by. I'm looking forward to my trip. I mean, that's certainly sometimes the case, but you literally see not only just a bunch of foreign faces, but you see like actual trafficking occurring where there will be all of these people cloaked and they'll be surrounding you and they will be speaking languages that you, even as somebody who is, let's say, anthropologically inclined, you don't even recognize those languages. And then you overhear like the one like white English person, not like literally English, but the old like one white lady speaking English. And she's like, okay, here's where you're going. Here's where you're going and you're going. Give this paper to this person. Say this. Do you see it? I'll highlight it. I will highlight it for you, what you say. And it's like they're literally giving them a script with specific instructions on where to go, what to say, to allow themselves to be like trafficked throughout the country. And you just have to like stand there like kind of, I mean, what are you going to do? You're just like allowing this to happen next to you. There's like a mob of these people literally being trafficked. And so all of that is to say that Americans experiencing the airport, which by the way, it's something like 3 million Americans a day are using one of these airports. Something like half of Americans use an airport at least at one point throughout the year. That is going to contribute to like the vibe of being an American and how you view your country, its sovereignty, its direction, whether it's really yours, whether you have a future. It is very important to increase the vibes of like the American experience, which I know that sounds silly, but that's also why the Trump administration, one of the first things they did in its second iteration was to get rid of the shoe requirement at TSA. You know how you go through TSA and you have to take off your shoes and it's like a big hassle because it's like, okay, I'm taking off my shoes. Now I got to like lace them back up. And it's like weird. It's like a whole thing. It's not a pleasant experience. It's not technologically required. It's not even proven actually when they've done studies on this that it would actually reduce instances of untoward objects getting through security. But nonetheless, that is something that we all had to do. If it were 2021, I would tell you it's a humiliation ritual. But nonetheless, like this is something that Americans had to do. It's annoying. Nobody likes it. We're not even confident that it makes the air travel experience safer. So Trump says, okay, this is done. This is stupid. We're getting rid of that. Okay, that is like a quality of life increase. Like people are now realizing when they go to the airport, hey, I don't have to do that thing that I didn't like doing anymore. I mean, I still have to go through security. I still feel safe, but I don't have to take my shoes off. Like that's cool. Quality of life increases, vibes increase. That reflects how people express themselves politically. This is also the same thinking behind grocery prices and gas prices. Crime, literally the experience of America as something you view positively or negatively. And I think that with some of the more unpopular actions of the Trump administration recently, in terms of not just the base, the MAGA base, but like literally just Americans in general, things like the military conflict in Iran, the Iran war, that is obviously going to be something that Americans are feeling a bit squeamish about, to put it diplomatically. And so I'm not saying that this is going to like offset that, like, hey, we can like go to war with Iran, but as long as we like have ICE agents in the airport, like everything's going to be fine and we can still do well in the midterms. I'm not saying that, but I am saying it is important for administrations to take this seriously. These like perhaps trivial, but actually like very meaningful quality of life increases that many Americans are experiencing. And I also think it's important to make that vibe experience like pretty hostile actually to people who aren't supposed to be here, to illegal aliens. Like I want illegal aliens to go to the airport and see ICE patriots who they have seen on their TikTok, social media, Telegram, wherever they are perusing the internet, and they see videos of their compatriots getting deported, their compatriots getting, you know, what they believe to be like innocently freaking gunned down, even though, of course, as we covered, they're like drawing on ICE agents. I want them to experience the vibes of the American airport as something that is unwelcoming to them, actually. I don't think that these hubs of American travel should be welcoming to illegal aliens. Foreigners, maybe. Tourists, yeah. But people who are literally like operating actual trafficking hubs, apparently everyone cares so much about trafficking. Literal human trafficking hubs are what our airports have turned into. Yeah, I want them to see actually scary ICE patriots occupying the airport. I want them to believe all of their like Reddit Hollywood propaganda about like ICE patriots asking for like papers or something, even though that's not what's happening. These people are just assisting with like normal security operations. It doesn't matter. These people are I guess you'd say maybe squeamish. They are a little superstitious. It is enough to simply have a presence of this kind of law enforcement all throughout the country, all throughout our country's airports, to make these people less able to operate how they would like to, less able to operate how they have been. You know, they need to be afraid of bad vibes. That's why you're seeing, you know, in all these metropolitan areas, traffic decreasing. You know, the roads are empty. Construction sites empty. Places where illegal aliens used to hang out and wait for people to come up and hire day labor, empty. Not because these people are necessarily being deported, but because they are retreating. They are going into hiding. They are hibernating because they understand that they're actually not able to operate in this country how they used to, which is to say, without a care in the world. They collect their welfare, maybe they vote, they do whatever, but they don't have to worry actually about an administration enforcing immigration law and deporting them. They can more or less do whatever they want, and actually, it's even better than that because American citizens are going to pay for it. I want that to be a much different environment. I want it to be unwelcoming, because when you have that kind of unwelcoming environments, not only throughout the country, but even at places of entry, places where they would go from one airport to the other, again, doing as they will, usually at the expense of the American taxpayer, getting all this comped by NGOs, quite often receiving grants perhaps from the American taxpayer, that will contribute to self-deportations, which are happening and are actually historically a more efficient means of deportation than forced deportations. You know, we've talked about this extensively. Whenever you have some kind of grand deportation operation, there's always going to be a ratio between those who are deported forcefully, which means, you know, at the assistance or order of law enforcement, and those who self-deport because they recognize that their family's getting deported. They recognize that they're not going to be able to work, live, travel. So they're like, I may as well just go back to my country of origin. Because again, they don't actually possess a real loyalty to American soil. It's simply an opportunity to get free stuff. If that goes away, the little play date's over. Okay, well now they may as well just like go back, right? So insofar as we can contribute to that environment, something is like not welcoming actually, that is going to make the vibe experience of the illegal alien more negative, which is going to, though it'd be difficult to quantify, it is going to make them more likely to pursue self-deportation as an option. And again, I am not saying that this is happening with that intention specifically. I'm sure that's something they've considered. I think that really what this is more about just making sure that the trains are running on time. Americans can get where they're going to get. They understand that the Trump administration is looking out for them. It's the Democrats specifically impeding this. That's what's going on here. However, as a byproduct of that, it is true that it is going to cultivate a less welcoming and even hostile environment towards criminal illegal aliens who should not be in this country at all. And it's good, too, like Trump said, to normalize that. You know, as people encounter law enforcement in their day-to-day, they realize law enforcement are actually just like more or less good guys who are like actually extraordinarily patient. You know, you watch an hour of body cam footage. This is more or less the takeaway that you're going to have. The same thing with like encountering ICE. You know, it's one thing if you hear about them on social media, your like wine aunt talks about them at Thanksgiving. When you just see like normal ICE patriots who are just like, you know, talking to you, hanging out, just doing whatever. They look like guys that you went to college with, went to high school with. They're just like normal. They're just like dudes. They're just patriots. That is going to actually increase their public perception because it humanizes them, because that is what they are. They are actually much unlike the people you're surrounded by at the airport. ICE patriots actually are Americans. They actually are patriots, and they actually do care about you and your country and your ability to operate with a sort of sovereignty, with a sort of manifest destiny within your own borders. And so, yeah, I think it's basically good to continue this sort of like politics as vibes theory. And, this is going to happen regardless, by the way. Like, this is just an actual thing that is happening, sort of how people are experiencing the country, experiencing politics. It's just good to play that game. You even see a lot of that with kind of like the anti-Trump conservatism that you're seeing increasingly. Like, I get these Instagram reels all the time, which I don't even watch this content, so I don't know why it's recommending them to me. I'm assuming it's a psyop, frankly, where you'll see like some guy and he's like super like freaking based and red-pilled, and he'll say something where he's like, my politics is this: anti-Trump, anti-Republican, anti-Democrat, pro-freedom, pro-2A, anti-war, whatever that's called, that's me. And it's like, okay, dude, the reason you have to say that, the reason you have to qualify that you are anti-Trump is because you are sensing a vibe, which is to say you are sensing that the Democrats are extremely agitated. You are sensing that the Republican Party, Donald Trump's Republican Party, has not been able to actually press the fix everything button, permanently defeat the bad guys button. You are sensing a resurgence of leftist dominance. You are trying to take an exit. You are trying to get off the highway before that actually happens. I remember seeing people do this in 2016, where they would say, when everybody was getting involved in politics, it was fun, how everybody does every 4 years for every election. People would say that. They would take that. We're like, hey, like, I just don't like Hillary Clinton. But I don't like Trump. I like John Kasich. I like Ted Cruz. Anything but like align yourself with the actual thing that is going on, which is Donald Trump's movement. You cannot like that for whatever reason. That is actually what's going on. Any change that's happening is because of that. Everything that's going on is going to be held by that standard or held to that standard. So it's like really convenient for you to express yourself politically and be like, hey, I don't believe in Trump. I don't like Republicans, but, I don't like Democrats either. I'm anti-war. I'm all this other stuff. That is still experiencing politics as vibes. When it's 2024 and Trump is surviving assassination attempts and getting mugshotted and then like wins the election, notice how none of that sentiment was there at the time because the vibes were positive. Everything was going our way. It was the ending of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Everything was great. So there was none of this, I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like this. It was all positive. It was all screw you, libtard. Everything's great. We're going to make America great again. Now, suddenly, people have rediscovered reasons to be a little bit on this Trump stuff, just like they did in 2022 when the vibes were a little bit more shaky, just like they did in 2020 when the vibes were a little shaky, in 2017 when the vibes were a little shaky. That's all it is. So it's like you can intellectualize the vibes all you want, but that's not actually going to get us anywhere where we need to go. It's the same thing with like fertility. People were talking about this over the weekend, so I guess we'll touch on it a little bit about how to actually increase birth rates, about how to actually, get people to people who you want to be having kids at a level above replacement. Again, when you have to start intellectualizing like the most baseline impulse, you're pretty much already cooked. And so all of those solutions, not only have they never been proven to work empirically, like these sort of like, tax incentives for having more children, it doesn't work. And it also doesn't make the people who you want to be having kids to be having more kids. There is a problem that's much deeper than that, which perhaps we'll discuss at a later time. But yeah, it's like all of that trying to like rationalize or intellectualize baseline vibe experiences in a way that maybe get people in a more advantageous place. You're nervous about perhaps the Trump vibes. You want to set yourself up to say, hey, I wasn't aligned with that. Please don't prosecute me. Whereas if you are more or less committed to the patriot cause, then you're going to try to view things maybe more optimistically, not let the bad vibes dissuade you, work with what we have, and ultimately move the ball down the field in a positive direction. So I think that's good. I'm proud of what ICE is doing. I'm proud of what ICE has been doing. I think it's going to be good to see them in the airports. And I saw some, again, planned distrusters say that, why are they in the airports when they should be doing this other stuff? And it's like, dude, okay, first of all, like, yes, in an ideal world, like that is what would be going on. However, we're in the real world, which is not ideal. Democrats are impeding TSA. They are making it such that Americans are going to be more immiserated. That is bad. That is going to harm us as a political cause. Therefore, we need to use the tools that we have to solve that problem. ICE can step up to the plate. If we didn't have the largest increase in immigration enforcement funding, which is to say more ICE agents, I would maybe agree with you. I'd maybe say, oh man, we've only got so many of these guys. Should we really be putting them in airports? Good news. We have more of these guys than ever. We can spare a few at the airports, especially if it's going to have the ROI, which we have here articulated. I think that's going to be okay. Also, a lot of you people didn't even support the BBB anyway, so I don't really care what you have to say in the first place. You aligned yourself with anti-BBB operators. So to continue to engage with you in good faith would be a debasing exercise in dishonesty. Therefore, I opt out. You, however, should opt in. You should go over to Blaze. You should use my code Doyle to sign up over and get really good content. You get behind the paywall. It's going to be fantastic. We've got good stuff there already. Good stuff coming around the corner. Actually, use my code Doyle. You get $20 off. What a deal. What a steal. And how? I can't even believe it. Anyway, go over there. Check that out. Definitely want to look into that. We will be back to talk about studies and data and why you have to be optimistic or else you're like an idiot. Okay, BRB. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the program to discuss why, if you are not optimistic at all times, you are actually subhuman and deserve to basically roll over and await your imminent death. I saw something on the internet which aligned with my preconceived beliefs, and so obviously I amplified it and provided my own commentary that I believe to be true. It was some experiment actually. We'll put it up on the screen involving dogs in a clinical setting, and someone tagged me in it and said, at John Doyle on how demoralization actually won't result in epic and based uprising. So I saw this, and the tweet basically had a graphic of a dog, and it was doing its dog thing. But the tweet read, from these experiments, it was thought that it was to be only one cure for helplessness. In Seligman's hypothesis, the dogs do not try to escape because they expect that nothing they do will stop the shock. To change this expectation, experimenters physically picked up the dogs and moved their legs, replicating the actions the dogs would need to take in order to escape from the electrified grid. This had to be done at least twice before the dogs would start willfully jumping over the barrier on their own. So essentially, you have a dog in a setting, as illustrated by the graphic. The dog is going to be on one side of this, grid where it's going to receive an electric shock. The dog will have to jump over the barrier to the other side, and if he does this, he will not be shocked. And he was actually having to, they had to drag the dog and show him exactly what to do before he realized what he was supposed to be doing, and he would actually willfully jump on the barrier at his own accord. In contrast, threats, rewards, and observed demonstrations had no effect on the quote-unquote helpless, which is to say demoralized Group 3 dogs. And it says most of the Group 3 dogs, which had previously learned that nothing they did had any effect on shocks, would simply lay down passively and whine when they were shocked. And so I reply to this and I say, so after being convinced that they were powerless, they just laid down and whined while accepting the negative consequences rather than being accelerated into a kind of uprising. Very interesting. Really makes you wonder why there's so much demoralization around here. And this is absolutely correct. And again, I'm not saying that you can understand humans based on, the behavior of dogs in a lab setting. But I am saying there is something there, obviously, which we all kind of understand is true, about demoralization, about hopelessness, about the virtue of hope. I think that this is also kind of how we've discussed male suicide before in terms of what actually drives men to become depressed and commit suicide versus women, for example. Women will experience depression in a very immediate state. They will be depressed about something. They are more likely to attempt suicide, which is to say they will be upset about something in the moment and maybe just do something meh, for attention or because they're sad or whatever. It is less committed than a man arriving at a conclusion quite rationally, which is to say, my situation is bad and there's actually no way out of it. Men can be in very bad situations and not become depressed and not become in states of despair so long as they believe there's a way out of it. And in fact, they may even be excited about the challenge and the sort of journey to getting out of that situation, but they have to believe that there is a way out. If they don't believe there's a way out, if they believe truly that they are imprisoned, then they will actually, become depressed, and quite often that can become ugly. And so you see the similar thing here with the dogs in the lab setting, where if they learned that there was nothing that they could do to prevent the shock, it didn't matter if they were incentivized with a reward, a treat. It didn't matter if they were incentivized with, I don't know, some kind of demonstration, hey, look, you can do this, you'll be fine. Everything will be fine. Look, just jump over. That didn't matter. It didn't matter if they were threatened, hey, do this or it's going to be bad. They're fuck you, it's already bad. What am I supposed to do? This all kind of squares actually with what we may understand about, human behavior in situations where they're despondent. They don't think that there's a way out. Whereas literally taking the dog and showing him Here's what you have to do. Look, it's possible. It's one thing if I just demonstrate, they're like, I could never do that. That's not going to work. Literally showing him, hey, jump over. It's possible. Everything's going to be fine. Only then did the dog actually have a certain kind of confidence about its place and realize it could actually get itself out of the bad situation. So I said, also interesting, you couldn't threaten them. You couldn't give immediate rewards, encouragement. You couldn't demonstrate to them like, hey, look, this works. None of that was enough to have them believe that there was a way out worth pursuing. It was only when they were literally dragged into what works that they understood. I wonder why most people, or the people most attacked around here on the right, are the ones dragging people who usually themselves are kicking and screaming into what works. And I think that's exactly it. You know, certainly a lot of the demoralization and the blackpilling that we see is simply due to the nature of the ecosystem which we all inhabit, which is to say news media, which is to say content. It's the famous adage, right? Nobody ever reads a headline that says, plane landed safely. Everybody always wants to read about the plane crash. There is virtually no demand for good news anywhere ever. Everybody always wants to read about the plane crashes and the mass shootings and the true crime. There's no reason to expect that wouldn't manifest in political content also. So that is like sort of baseline from where we are embarking in terms of people's attitudes about the content that they want to perceive, what they want to believe about the world. It's more exciting, whatever you want to call it. But in terms of an actual like political implication, I do fully believe, that demoralization is syndicated for a reason. I do think that there is one group of people and one political organization that stands to benefit from the current political organization, which is incumbent, which nominally controls branches of government. There's obviously a benefit to the people who installed that political coalition and should support it. There's obviously a benefit to those people being demoralized and viewing there to be no way out of the situation. That is not something that resonates with me. I don't like that attitude already, which I think is why I can sometimes be calloused in dealing with the black pillars and the panicans, which I don't mean to be. But, remember, on my laptop for the longest time, I had that sticker. New England versus Atlanta. Was it Super Bowl 51? I'm not even like a football guy. I remember having that game on while I was finishing like an AP Econ project in high school, and I was like passively watching it, and I heard like, they're down however many points. What was the score? I'm going to be an idiot for forgetting. Was it like 23-8 or something with like 5 minutes left in the third quarter? Something like that. Or maybe it was 28-3. Yeah, 28-3 with like, 5 minutes left or something in the third quarter. And it was over for New England. They were cooked. Atlanta was already taking a victory lap. And what does Tom Brady do, dude? Again, literally, I don't even care about, I care about specifically Tom Brady, specifically because of this game. Tom Brady just like literally like rallied the troops. He just goes around saying like, no, we're going to win. We're going to play harder. We're going to play better. You could have been a panicking, dude. You could have been a panicking on the Patriots bench and been like, how is this going to work? This has never happened before. They've never had a comeback in the history of the NFL, in the history of Super Bowls, that has been what we would have to do right now. We would have to play a perfect game. Like, there's always a reason to demoralize, to be a panicking, to be a pessimist, even when pessimism is actually more rational than optimism. If you had an AI analyzing that game, the rational answer would have been to assume that, in fact, Atlanta was going to win. Tom Brady, through sheer willpower, got his guys, whether it was Brady, I think Julian Edelman, was Amendola still on the team? Dude, I'm getting nostalgic. I'm getting fired up. He rallied these guys into, like the greatest comeback in the history of like the Super Bowl, which, again, I know that we're anti-sports ball or whatever. That is like one of the greatest, pieces of American culture still. So, you don't have to hate that necessarily. But that is an example of American excellence and optimism. You can read about this in any sort of like military conflict, any project. It is never a good idea to despair. Like, people see that things are going bad and they think that me not freaking out about that means that I disagree that things are going bad sometimes, or that actually I'm trying to make them not realize that things aren't perfect. It's just a difference in how we want to approach the situation tactically. I don't think it's good to spread this kind of despair, which, by the way, is usually never even accurate. Usually it's just people like making something up in their head and then getting mad about it, and then it gets disproven 2 days later, and then they want to say nothing. They never issue a correction or a retraction. They just move right on to the next thing to like panic about, which I think is because they're bored, or because general human appetite for, content, they want it to be more negative, despairing, whatever. But ultimately, like, that is not what's going to get anything done. And I don't fault, by the way, like the people, because again, these are baseline human attitudes. But I do just want to reiterate to anybody who, views themselves to be one of the people trying to actually move the ball down the field. You cannot give in to that. You cannot be despondent or give in to despair. You are literally going to have to be the one rallying the troops. That is what leadership is. Rallying people who are experiencing the vibes of a situation as something quite not good for patriots, literally, in the example of the Super Bowl, right? But again, you can pick any military conflict, great battles. I mean, look at when Washington crossed the Delaware. There's a great story there, literally freezing at Valley Forge. People have already gone home. Like, you're done. It's over for you. Somebody can rise to the occasion and spread optimism, spread morale in the face of like a grand Leviathan, imminent defeat. And there's a virtue in that, one of the cardinal virtues, hope. And yeah, that actually requires a certain demonstration of behavior also. And what we find is that when people are in states of despair, when they give up on hope and they feel as though they are powerless to control their own situation, they are a passenger to their own destiny. Somebody else is the puppeteer, and they have no agency. They are only waiting for things to be done to them rather than actualizing things at their own accord. When people are in that kind of situation, what do? They lay down and they whimper and they accept bad consequences. They accept bad things happening to them. And they whimper. And they're upset about it. And they'll tell you all about how it's undesirable and how it shouldn't be happening and whatever. But ultimately, they just take it. They just accept it. They are passive. I don't like that. That is anti-American. That is anti-patriot. Frankly, it's just like anti-everything good, anti-masculine. I don't even know what you would call it. You're just being gay. You're literally like laying down and just taking it, which is gay. And so, yeah, this has never been sentiment or behavior that's resonated with me in an apolitical context. In a political context, I understand, again, why it's so popular, but this is not something that's effective. You can enjoy it for entertainment's sake, for whatever, but don't tell me that this is something that's actually going to get us into a better situation, because it's not. That goes against human nature. That goes against history. That goes against everything. Spreading despair, which, by the way, usually is false, does not get anybody into a better situation. You can wake people up to what's going on without lying to them and just deliberately trying to make everybody lay around bitching and doing nothing while these people pillage and rape our entire country. There are ways to go about this productively, which I have tried to set an example of. My friends have tried to set examples of. Things seem to be going pretty well in that regard. And nonetheless, we do have this whole class of people who are dedicated to despair, to being a panickin, to impeding what otherwise seems to be going decently well, to not contributing in good faith, to not criticizing in good faith. Those people are going to have to be dragged like kicking and screaming by people who can more or less like resist all of that and keep their eye on the ball. I think that's going to be very important because, yeah, otherwise, you know, you can have your rewards, which is to say social media engagement. You can have your demonstrations, which is to say just like blind optimism that isn't actually grounded in anything. That is your like blind plan trusting, like, hey, this is working. Don't worry, trust the plan. I've never been that guy, even though people want to mischaracterize me as such. And you can have your threats, which again is, hey, if you don't trust the plan, you're blah, blah, blah. You're blah, blah, blah. I've never been that guy, jokingly sometimes, but genuinely, I've never been that guy. Threats, rewards, demonstrations, none of that actually works. All that works is like literally being made to understand through your own action that you can actually contribute to your own success, which in our context is defined by the success of our country, of our people, of everything. So that is very important. That is what we are trying to communicate. There is no practical reason to ever entertain anything else. It is not going to get you in a better position. It's not going to be good for your spirit. It's not going to be good for your country. It's not going to be good for anything except masturbating on the internet, which ostensibly, if you're a fan of my content, is something we try to dissuade. So anyway, that about does it for the program today. I do want to tell you, you got to go over to Apple, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Go ahead, leave us a review with your thoughts. We will see you back here on Wednesday for yet another fantastic show where we drag everybody kicking and screaming into alignment with reality, because such is our cross to bear. Isn't it fun? We wouldn't want it any other way. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. God bless your family. We'll see you back here in like literally 2 days. Wow, crazy. All right, bye.